Thank you. I hope you can hear me a little bit. I want to tell you a story. When I was a teacher, I used to whisper to make the kids listen more. But I will try and use my voice a little bit today. Once upon a time, Once upon a time, in a county far, far away, Yorkshire, there lived a little girl called Kate. Every day, Kate would sit on the carpet in her classroom, waiting excitedly for story time. She was a shy girl and would probably now be seen as being a little anxious. But she loved school. Especially that magical time at the end of the day when Mrs. Duffy would get the book from her desk and gather the children on the carpet to read the next chapter of Millie Molly Mandy, or The Owl Who Was Afraid of the Dark. It was a time of relaxation, a time when no questions would be asked, nothing had to be proven, a moment in the day to escape into another world. One Monday morning in the autumn term, Kate arrived in her classroom and sat on the carpet as usual. Mrs. Duffy went through the register as she always did. And then she stood up, and on the blackboard, she wrote some words that would change Kate's life forever. A day in the life of a toffee apple. The children spent the whole morning thinking about what might happen to a toffee apple. What would it do? How would it feel? And then they wrote a story using this as the title. In that moment, a world of possibilities opened up for Kate. She imagined what might happen to the toffee apple. How would the day end for that sweet apple? That weekend, Kate pleaded with her mum to use the typewriter, a very precious grown-up tool, so she could write her own story. She sat with her knees tucked under the coffee table, tapping on the typewriter keys, and tried her best to remember the words that she'd written at school. As Mum hung washing on the area next to her, the story began to appear. She carefully drew pictures to go with the story, and with her mum's help, she made the story into a little book. Over the following weeks, Kate wrote story after story, imagining she were other inanimate objects. And just like that, Kate was a writer. When I was thinking about the moment that I realised I loved writing, this was the moment that came to me. It's not my memory of writing, but it is my earliest memory of creative writing. But what was so special about that lesson? Well, it was the first time that I can remember being set a writing where there wasn't an expectation. There was no right or wrong answer. Whatever I could imagine was okay. Over the subsequent weeks, we did lots of different creative writing lessons. We learned techniques for writing letters, newspaper articles, poems, more stories. All the time we were learning the structures and the key features of those texts, but we didn't care. We were just enjoying writing. It was also while sitting in Mrs. Duffy's classroom that I decided I wanted to become a teacher. It was actually because of the star chart she had. I wanted to be able to put the sticky stars on. But nonetheless, 15 years later, I did become a teacher. A lot had changed in the world of education in that time. And by the time I set foot in my first classroom, it's me. I did used to have dark hair. By the time I sat foot first classroom, things had changed a lot. I was teaching year 5 in the inner cities in Bradford. And by that time, story time was something that was pretty much limited to Key Stage 1. Despite that, I knew it was important, and I knew that the children in my class weren't having stories read to them very often at home. Most of them didn't even have books at home. So I would sit them on the carpet several times a week, much to their initial protest, and read the latest chapter book to them, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. It's a while since I started teaching, and none of them had heard of it. But within a little while, they were all rushing to finish their work as quickly as they could, so that we could read the next chapter together. Luckily, story time is now a feature in schools again, and stories are shared right through our education system. We know that by sitting sharing stories, children learn not only language and grammatical structures, it's more than that. By sitting sharing stories, it boosts our mental health. It can even boost self-esteem. It's really important that we share these stories with our children. By the time I was in my own classroom, writing hadn't fared so well. We were allowed to do writing activities, but nothing as free as I'd done myself. It was things like starting a story and allowing the children to finish it, or maybe writing a poem around a topic that we were doing. Of course, everything that's done within schools has to be justifiable and within the criteria. So we would mark for spelling, punctuation, and grammar, but the focus was still mostly on the content then. As time has gone on, this has become a greater focus. SPAG, as it is affectionately known in education, spelling, punctuation, and grammar. Writing has become a tick box exercise. Children are encouraged to use the right number of speech marks, adverbials, ellipses, words that most of us have never even heard of until we had to confront probably our own children's education. And all the imagination's been removed from the process of writing in schools. I was talking to some teachers recently, and one of them in particular made my heart sink. She said that in her opinion, there was no truly creative writing after year 1 in schools anymore. For those who don't know, year 1 are our 5 and 6-year-old children. In her opinion, there was no truly creative writing once children could write for themselves. I don't know whether you can see this, but this is some writing that my son did when he was 3. We'd been on a dragon hunt on Cannock Chase, and he did the writing at the bottom, and I wrote what he said that he'd written. Now, in our early years classrooms, this still happens a lot. Before children can write themselves, they tell stories to the staff, and the staff scribe them. Once they can write themselves, they become subject to the dreaded success criteria. Unfortunately, when I spoke to teachers about what they felt was creative writing, phrases like scaffolding and interrogating texts were used. That sounds like the opposite of creativity to me. So when teachers are helping children to write, they're being given these very tight guidelines. And at this point, I should say, I'm not attacking teachers. They do an amazing job, but they have to stick within the curriculum. So, my problem with this method of teaching writing is that not only does it kill creativity in our children, it can also be discriminatory. This quote from Keira Knightley, who was diagnosed in adulthood, I think, with dyslexia. says it all for me. She was very, very lucky. She had teachers who supported her through school. They appreciated that she struggled with spelling, but they gave her credit for the information that she was giving them, for the creativity that she shared. And that was the important thing. Imagine you're a child who struggles with spelling. When you go into school every day, you're marked against those dreaded success criteria and those SPAG elements. And you believe that you're not a writer, you can't write. Every single subject that we do at school involves writing. And at that point, you believe that you might as well not bother because you can't do it. Imagine how heartbreaking that is as a child. Stories are such an important part of our culture. They're a way for us to share information. It could be argued that even the world's religious texts are just a way of teaching us how to live a better life. Traditional tales and fairy tales provide the same function, but for our children, they teach them about the big wide world and how scary it is in a safe and comforting way. If I haven't won you over yet, maybe you believe that teaching creativity in schools is just a waste of time, that children should be doing something more practical. Maybe this will help. In a global IBM study in 2010, they found that the most important factor in success for leadership was creativity. Not how many awards a child gets, not what grades they get. The biggest key to success in life is how creative we are. It seems ironic then that every major change in education in my lifetime has diminished the priorities of creativity. Whether it be creative writing, art, drama, music, they've all gone further down the pecking order over the last 20 or 30 years. Not only do our children need to be creative so that they can be successful, it's also proven to be hugely beneficial for lots of other things. It's proven to boost self-esteem, confidence, it calms you down. There are so many benefits to writing freely. As a journal therapist and mindfulness practitioner, I know the benefit of just sitting down and spending a few moments a day just letting your pen or pencil go across the page. It's calming. But more than that, it's actually good for our physical health as well as our mental health. In the early 1980s, James W. Pennebaker did some research with university students. He took 2 groups of students and asked them to write every day for just 4 days. One group wrote about deep, important emotional issues, and the other wrote about trivial things. The group who wrote about the really emotional, really difficult things visited the health centre less and were ill less for 4 months afterwards. 4 days of writing resulted in 4 months of better health. In 2013, Smith and Laporte took that research even further and discovered that not only was it good for our immune system, but wounds and physical illnesses actually healed quicker when people were writing more creatively. I know that when I sit down to write, I can process things. We live in a world where there are so many things that are difficult to understand, but we need stories to help us to do that. When we sit down and we write creatively, we can write a dystopian novel and explore our uncertainties about the future of the world. A child can sit down and create a story about a child who's really worried because they don't see their grandparents as much as they used to. in an anonymous environment, but it helps them to process those emotions. When we read a story at a particularly challenging time, we can find elements of that story that we can relate to. It's so easy when we're going through a difficult time to feel like we're the only person who feels like that. When we read a story that somebody else has written, we learn that we're not alone. And that can have such a huge impact on us. Oh, too soon. When I was sitting in Mrs. Duffy's classroom all those years ago, childhood was a relatively carefree thing. Now, 1 in 3 children have mental health issues, and they're just the ones who've been and talked to somebody about it. If we don't deal with our children's mental health, we can't expect them to learn. We know that scientifically, as soon as we feel scared or anxious or stressed, our prefrontal cortex shuts down. All the things that we need to help us to think and problem solve and process information is abandoned in favour of survival. Even if all we care about is results, and I hope that's never the case, but even if it is, we have to first look after our children's mental health, and then they can get the results that we need to move up the league tables or whatever it is that's important to us. By teaching children to write truly creatively, we give them life skills, we broaden their vocabulary, we boost their confidence, we give them greater self-esteem, and so many other benefits. And as a parent, that's all I want for my children. Surely it can't be a coincidence that as time has gone on and we've diminished the importance of creativity in schools, our children's mental health has worsened. Perhaps if there were more toffee apples in the classroom and fewer success criteria, everyone would be happier. Thank you.